Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christy, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. Oh, are you in for a treat today? I have Adam Hill with us, who is a fellow podcaster for a podcast that I had the opportunity to be on. He took a chance on me, and I am so glad to get to introduce him to all of you. His podcast is called Flow Over Fear, and it's kind of game changing. But before we get into all of that, Adam, welcome, first of all.
Thank you. So glad to be here, Christy. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be fun. But more importantly, you got to get people to want to stick around. So you've got probably 38 seconds or less to convince people they want to listen to you. So why should we listen to Adam Hill today?
All right. Well, it's going to be a dad joke. I hate to break it to you, but that's the only way that we'll get people to actually stay on board. So
fully appreciate that.
I'll start with that. Bring this to your kids. They're going to love you for it. No, they won't. They'll hate you for it, but they'll love you for it. All right. So what kind of boat do newlywed couples go on for their honeymoon?
Ooh. It's not a love boat. I don't know. What kind of boat?
Love boat would be good though. That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a relationship. So yeah.
Oh, well played, sir. Well, you know what? Snaps for you for that. I can sponsor a relationship. Okay. Now that you know you want to keep listening, my friends, Adam, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into this space?
Yeah, so long story, but I'll condense it down. My journey started when I was very young, just experiencing fear in my life, just experiencing anxiety. And it was back in a time growing up in the 80s and early 90s where we didn't really talk about that kind of stuff. We didn't talk about feeling like anxiety or fear. And that really stuck with me because most of the decisions that I made early in life were decisions that were rooted in fear. They were rooted in just trying to retreat or suppress it or push it down. And I didn't learn until way later that the more you try to push fear down and suppress it or pretend it's not there, that the bigger it gets, the more intense it gets, and the more you feel it. And over time, those little decisions that I made based on fear, like I'm gonna avoid trying out for the water polo team, or I'm gonna avoid talking to the girls that I like because I'm afraid of rejection, or I'm going to avoid this, and this. Stacking those experiences reinforced a lot of limiting beliefs in my life. And that led to that fear getting a lot bigger. And it led me down a path of debilitating anxiety, and panic, and ultimately alcoholism, which is where I lived for about over a decade of my life. I started drinking when I was in college. And what started out as something fun and something to do on the weekends and made me feel fearless and took that panic away and made me more social, descended into that vicious cycle of debilitating panic and shame while trying to get through most days and just drinking myself into blackouts at night. And it was just something I lost complete control of in my life. And that all came to a very, very terrible end when I broke the last rule that I said that I would never break for myself, which was I drank and drove, something I never thought I would do, and was certainly arrested for that. And as I was sitting in the jail cell, I realized at that point that I had lost complete control of my life, and I wasn't just a danger to myself, which, weirdly enough, for the last decade of my life, I was okay with.
Right.
But I was a danger to other people. And that led me to going in and seeking help for my alcoholism. And I got help through Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober through that community. And that experience, that first healing transformation that I went through, shaped my mindset around hope, because I'd been hopeless for so long. But I realized that through community, through that support, that I could overcome a lot of those things that I was afraid of. And for the first time in my life, I faced my fear and I started to overcome it. And that transformed my life into a world where I could look at fear in a new way. It wasn't that I stopped feeling it. It was just that I reframed it into something where I turned it into a signal that was more of an opportunity to grow rather than something I needed to suppress or run away from.
There's so much power in your words, and thank you for being vulnerable enough to share your story. We all have things that we aren't necessarily proud of and yet have turned us into the adults we are today. And you've been sober for a long time now. You just had a big milestone, didn't you?
I did, yeah, 12 years in January 22nd, so of 2024.
We won't do
So yeah,
math and we won't figure out exactly how old you are. But
right.
but something that you said
I
that
was
I
12
think
when I got sober, so yeah.
exactly right. Good job. Good job. Congratulations. And in all seriousness, you personify what you preach in that you overcame the things that were really scary and hard and turned that into a motivator. Brene Brown says that when she wrote her book, Atlas of the Heart, in it, she talks about the fact that anxiety and excited are actually the exact same emotion. And
Mhm.
it's what you choose to do with that energy that allows you to handle it one way or another, right? And it sounds like over the last 12 years, you've figured out how to shift it from anxiety to excited, which is pretty impressive. You mentioned Alcoholics Anonymous. You mentioned that you just decided, no, I don't want to do this anymore. But what was it that allowed you officially to go from anxious to ready to
Mhm.
go?
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I mean, and I think that there's a couple of steps in reframing your relationship with fear. I mean, there's many steps to it, but two primary, I think, spectrums you're on. And that first step is for someone like me who was in the depths of alcoholism and really unhealthy habits, coping mechanisms to deal with it. There was a healing element. That first healing element, so vital, like getting that healing element. I think that there's important parts of being willing to change that I had to adopt. There is, and then there's the important part of community, a community of like-minded individuals, all striving for this similar goal. For me, it was sobriety, and that included elements of mentorship and cohort and trust. So I had to learn to trust in a community. And then, of course, just after that, it's you're finding hope and you're kind of working in that. And then as I went through that process about a year later, after about a year after getting sober, when as I was about to celebrate I realized that, hey, I just did something that I thought that I could never do, getting sober. I mean, I spent more than a decade drunk, and it wasn't because I wanted to be there. It was because I didn't really know how or believe in myself that I could actually get out of that until I had to. And then I realized it became a point of reference for me that I could achieve things that I once thought were impossible. And throughout my first year in sobriety, I was always told something very important, that you shouldn't make any major life changes your first year in recovery. And what I translated that in my mind to mean was that at 1 year of sobriety, I needed to make a major life change.
Oh gosh.
And and so that's like, so when I hit a year, I was thinking like, well, racking my brain, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? And when I hit that year of sobriety, I thought of the Ironman triathlon. And the reason I thought about that was because many years earlier, when I was still in the midst of my alcoholism, I saw the Ironman World Championship on television.
Hmm.
And it was so inspiring to see these amazing athletes doing what they were doing. I mean, for those who don't know, they swim 2.4 miles, they bike 112 miles, and they run a full marathon all in one day. And I was
Which
so
is
inspired by it. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
maybe the definition of insanity. Like I am an exerciseaholic, but that's a lot of
It's a
exercise
lot.
in one day. So you didn't say, "Oh, I'm just gonna like do the little thing." You said, "Let me do the Mac Daddy version of crazy." Okay, I love it. I love that you translated into that. So say more.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I didn't actually like, but I thought it was insane when I first saw it too. Like, because when I was in the midst of my addiction and I was watching it on television, I was like, those people are crazy. I can't believe they're doing it. But that little spark in my mind was like, what if I could do something like that?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever had that thought, that there's that transformational like questions that we ask when we're inspired by something.
Yeah.
And those are pivotal moments, because if we actually lean into them, they could change our lives. But a lot of times our brains scream louder than our hearts,
Mhm.
and we lean into the fear. And at that time I was retreating from fear, and my brain told me all sorts of lies. That's not you. You're not an Iron Man. You can't do that. You're an alcoholic. You smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. Go back to feeling sorry for yourself. And so I put down that dream, but it
Mm.
planted a seed. And 7 years later, when I had a year of sobriety, that seed sprouted. And like that, and then I thought about it again. And then with that point of reference of sobriety, I was like, well, why not? And
Yeah.
it's important to note too that nothing about my physical condition changed over that 7 years. I was still unhealthy. I was still smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was not in great shape.
Mm.
But the only thing that changed was my mindset. And it changed with a lot of work, but my mindset changed. And that was the thing that drove me to actually lean into that fear, that thing that I was afraid of. And Then the next few years of just racing an Ironman taught me that, wow, when you experience something that you're afraid of that also excites you, there's an opportunity there to really, really grow into something amazing.
So my word for 2024 is opportunity, because I think every situation is an opportunity. You get to decide, right? So my husband and I work with soon to be married couples to give them some tools for their marriage. And one of the things that we talk about is their personalities. And the personality test that we use has strengths on one side and weaknesses on the other. And I always say it's strengths and opportunities. And they're like, what do you mean? I mean, like, I don't want to call them weaknesses, because they're not, they're opportunities. And you seized quite a few opportunities to become who you are. And you didn't just do it in your physical, you also did it in your business. Like you said, okay. I mean, I don't believe it was at the exact same time, but soon after you said, okay, I'm going to pivot who I am and what I do. So you're talking to a bunch of leaders who are leading others to do something, whether it's to follow them personally, professionally, whatever. What advice would you have for leaders about figuring out how to seize those opportunities and flow over fear?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the first part is identification. And one thing that I was grateful for learning there is that when I that sobriety point was a point of reference for me, that I could achieve something I thought that I couldn't do. And then when I started competing in Ironman, I started stacking all of these points of reference for myself of things that I thought that I couldn't do. And so more things became possible for me, but the fear didn't go away. The fear doesn't really go away. You just change your relationship with it. And so I think the first thing that to do really in those situations is identify like what I call I call those pivotal moments are. It's those moments where excitement rises up in you, like you're just super pumped to you really, really want this thing. And that fear rises up in the equal measure. Because at that point in time, I believe that that's your heart and your brain simultaneously screaming at you, Eureka and no. And that's the signal that you're on to something that's great. So once you identify that's the important step of like moving it forward. And then recognizing that there's really, when you look at fear that we have in our lives today, over the course of however many hundreds of thousands of years humans have existed, for the vast 99.99999% of that time, fear was telling us that we were in danger, that there was something outside of our cave that was going to eat us or something like that. But in the last 150, 200 years, or however long, when we started finding the comforts of air conditioning and central heating, that fear didn't really signal danger anymore as often. More often than not nowadays, that fear is not signaling danger. So if it's not danger, then what is it? And if you can look at it that way, I think that fear it can really be categorized into three specific areas: uncertainty, overwhelm, or self-doubt.
Oh, okay. Uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. Do you want to give a little more definition to each? Because I'm listening through the lens of, I have twins. They're 22, almost 23. Both of them have very clear anxiety opportunities. My family, I have two dads that have one biological and one married in. Like, there are very close to me people who struggle with this. So you said uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. Tell me more.
Yes. Yeah, and absolutely. And I want to kind of provide this general disclaimer here too, that fear is debilitating. I mean, fear can be anxiety. I mean, it can really, really impact our lives. And so it's really important to know where you are and that kind of help you need. You might need help from somebody with a lot of letters after their name, which I don't have. But you might, I mean, there might, yeah, you might, yeah, yet. But you might need that kind of, and that was certainly something that I got early on. I've been with the same therapist for 12 years and worked through a lot of these issues. But when I talk about uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt, I use those in the context of like, those are, generally speaking, primarily a lot of the fear we experience on a day-to-day basis of what we seek. So uncertainty is that fear like we have about the future, that the fear of the unknown, the fear that there might be something that in the way of us and our goal that we just don't know, and it keeps us stuck where we're at because we just don't know how to proceed forward. We lack that conviction. And then overwhelm is just having too much on our plates, like too much stimulus coming in. We just can't process it all. And our instinct when we feel overwhelmed, or when we feel that overwhelm, we have this instinct to push as hard as we can or as fast as we can and just try to like sheer force our way through overwhelm. And when we do that, we burn out. We get burned out.
Yeah.
And then there's self-doubt, and self-doubt is that big one, that really big, I'm not worth it. I can't do that. I don't have what it takes to achieve what I want to achieve.
Mm.
And those are really like when that happens, that self-doubt trap gets you into that shame. And it's hard when that happens. But I think that there's solutions on what you can do to try to get to reframe that. Because when you think about those three things, uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt, and you think of it in the context of they feel like obstacles in your life to progress or whatever, you also have to acknowledge that when you pursue big things, or when you're a leader, when you're pursuing things that are bigger than yourself, or leading teams, or facing challenges, and you're taking those on, you will feel uncertainty, overwhelm, self-doubt. They're inevitabilities. And if you could frame it like that, you can actually begin to go into solution mode and find those solutions to them. And I think that when you do that, you start to find conviction in the face of uncertainty. And then you find discipline in the face of overwhelm. And then you start to find incremental growth in the face of self-doubt. And that's really the path to finding that freedom beyond the fear and working with fear in your favor and finding the opportunity in it.
So you're not saying that it ever goes away or that you can minimize it because it's very real.
Right.
But you're giving it a name, and anything that you give a name, you can control. And so I talk a lot about the difference between sphere of control and sphere of influence. So I say that this little guy right here is your sphere of control, that teeny tiny little hole, but your sphere of influence is enormous. And what I'm hearing you say is our sphere of influence over fear is much more manageable than we realize once we give it that name. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yes, I'm so glad you said it. And I love the way you frame that our sphere of control versus sphere of influence, because that puts in such a great context. When I talk about like when you're suppressing the fear and when you're pushing it down, you're giving more power to it.
Yeah.
And I love that you say when you give it a name, you actually you improve the sphere of influence, because when you name it, when you put it out there, and when you share it maybe with even a trusted community, somebody that's trusted, you actually remove the power from it. You're taking power away from it. And that's where you start to actually realize that you have some influence over your life, or that can actually be a signal, not for danger, but a signal for opportunity.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give a reference that makes me old, but you will appreciate it because I think you're in my same genre. You remember in the movie Aladdin when Robin Williams is the character at the time, I guess Will Smith redid it, but he says, phenomenal cosmic power, itty bitty living space. That's what that reminds me of, that we sometimes give phenomenal cosmic power to our fears, but the reality is they fit in a little bitty box. We just have to figure out how to get them back into the lamp, into that space. So, okay, I could talk to you for like 7 days, but we don't have 7 days. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And I want to ask you a question I ask all my guests, because every answer is a little different. If you had to define productive joy, what is productive joy to you?
I think it's I think it's in the first part of this title here, flow. And I think that productive joy really feels to me, when you say it, it feels like it's the type of work that gives you energy. You have that energy that kind of takes away your energy and you feel zapped by the end of the day and it's just draining. But the type of work where you're coming home and you are just lit up and you feel good about it, I mean, that's productive joy. I mean, ultimately, I think that life is really energy. I mean, we are just these sources of energy, and we can create that energy at will if we find the things that lift us up, and we find that perfect combination of things that we're passionate about, and that we're good at, and that we really, really enjoy doing. So I think that's productive joy.
Oh,
Hope I'm right about that.
Well, there is no right answer. There's no wrong answer. This is your answer. And I think your answer is solid. Just like all the ideas you've given us, like I'm looking at my notes going, oh my goodness. So you talked about the fact that fear is real and that there are 3 different kinds: uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And when we give it a name, we can put it back in the lamp. we can have a little more control over it, for that Aladdin reference again, that I'm old, but remember. You also talked about redefining your relationship with fear. And I think that the power I see in that is the idea that, one, it is up to us to define it. And we do have the ability to do so. Watching people who have anxiety, the kind that you can diagnose and should medicate, like, here it is, this is a problem. Everybody has anxiety at a certain level, right? But the kind that's debilitating. When you're in that space where you can't move forward, what's step one? Besides naming it, we talked about naming it, but is there a step one that you had to take so that you could become an Ironman triathlete, or so that you could start your own podcast, or so you could leap? What was step one?
I think step one is going back to the Alcoholics Anonymous reference. The step one that worked for me was admitting that I was powerless. And I think that part of that step one that's implied there is once you admit that and you stop trying to control it, like you're talking about, trying to control it, you find the community. And this is so important. Find the community of people that have been through it, that can help walk with you through it and serve as mentors and some kind of like on the same level kind of community. And that may just be one person. It may be a therapist. It may be a trusted guide. It may be a group of people, but make sure that it's a trustworthy place where you can be vulnerable in it, because you have to have that safe place to be able to name it. Because if you're just naming it by yourself, I mean, you maybe just be reinforcing that fear. You have to name it and put it out there vulnerably with someone else to be able to rise above it. And that was something that I didn't have until I got sober, because I was so afraid myself to find those communities. I was so reluctant to, because I was afraid to immerse myself in those communities of support. Would they judge me? Would they reject me? Would I not be allowed in there? And all of these were my brain telling me these lies. But when you find that right community, just know that there is that community of support, especially if you're going through something like anxiety or addiction.
Yeah.
Those communities exist, and they're there for you, and they're there to support you, and you have a way out. There's hope beyond that hopelessness.
Yeah. And you can't do it alone. I use the example often of, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And I've used that for years, but recently I have added a second phrase to that. There's only one way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, but it is a heck of a lot easier to eat with friends.
Yeah.
So there's your community, right? Like, you have to find the space to add others to your equation so that you get the return on investment necessary to be successful, right? I could go like literally in so many directions. It kind of hurts my head. So instead, I'm going to make people find you and listen to your podcast, because you've been doing this for a while, right? Like, how many episodes are you up to now?
Yeah, I just dropped about 166. So I've been doing it about a little over a year, maybe since November of 2022. So yeah, a little over a year now. Yep.
Well, and I know I was on it before you hit your 100th, because I remember when you hit your 100th, and I just remember you are so kind and you are such a good listener that when you bring people in, you are just, it's like a warm hug. Like, you're just like, okay, tell me more. And I want to hear it. And I have learned so much from you. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you've shared it. So before I ask the rapid fire questions, how might somebody find you? Like, what's the best way for people to get a little more Adam Hill in their life?
Well, thank you for that. And I'll say, you said that I took a chance, or that I took a chance on you.
You did.
I looked at it the opposite way, because you came on early on. You took a chance on my little show, and thank you. But yeah, they can find. I'm on all of the podcast platforms, and if you want to see my smiley face and neat background here and my guests, I would encourage you to go to YouTube. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/@AdamCHill. And you'll also see a lot of dad jokes here, dad jokes there. So be prepared. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if relationship is any indication, I think that they should go just for the dad jokes. Like, why would you do anything else? What does the C stand for, so that people will remember it?
It's Clifford, but it's not the greatest middle name, but
middle name. What's wrong with Clifford?
Clifford?
Big red dog.
Yeah, I know. Well, growing up, I'm dating myself now, but growing up with Clifford, the big red dog, that tended to be my moniker growing up. But I think that it works though, because at least the C makes it look like my name says Adam Chill, which is really great for my topic.
You know what? That's like a dad joke in writing. That's just perfect. Adam, chill. To flow over fear, dude. Settle down. I mean, there's so many things about that are good.
Right. That's what my mom used to say to me all the time too. Adam, chill. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those moms, they can get you every time, can't they?
Right.
Okay, so I have some rapid fire questions that I cannot wait to hear you answer. Are you excited? You ready?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh,
Always.
you should be so
Rapid fire is
excited.
just like two words I love. Yes.
Okay, so Adam, what is your definition of fun?
Fun is spending time with family and just being out in nature, being able to take my mind out of work and just appreciate whatever's around me and going on adventure. Adventure is the antidote to anxiety, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Tell us real quickly about your family. When you say family, who do you want to hang with?
So my wife, been married. We've been together. So we just celebrated our 25th year together. We met in college and been married 20 years this coming August. So yeah, depending on when this comes
So
out,
she's
then yeah.
seen Adam transform
Yes.
literally from one human to another. That's impressive. Well done.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done. And we,
She's been with me. Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
we must be very close to the same age because I've been with my husband. We've been together for 27 years and married 25 in June. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, clearly right around that same time. And I was obviously an infant when we got married. So that anyway. Okay, so second question. How do you know that you're showing up as your authentic self?
When I am afraid, I mean, I think that it's there's times like if we're experiencing that fear in the right way, I think, and when I say the right way, it's that excitement and that fear kind of popping up together where
Yeah.
you feel that energy around it. And you mentioned that excitement and fear kind of sit on the same spectrum,
Yeah.
right? I think for people who are anxious, they like myself, we tend to kind of err on that side of believing it's fear just because it's how it makes us feel. But when we lean into that authentic self, I just believe that it kind of brings up that inherent excitement in yourself that you are being your true self. And so it's going to feel a little bit scary. And yeah, so I know that because I just feel that fear that rises up in me
Yeah.
a little bit. But it also feels like once I actually deliver on what I'm delivering, I don't feel any shame around it necessarily. I feel relief. I feel release in a way.
Oh, great answer. Okay.
Thanks.
How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
Not well. Often not well. Yeah, I really like, I mean, if I'm kind of sharing what I try to preach or what I try to be in my life, I I listen to that Viktor Frankl quote, which I'm going to butcher, which is that in between stimulus and response, there's that space. And in that space, we have the power to choose our response. And I I try to make my default response, my default choice, take a breath and
Mm,
get curious.
mm.
So so that's kind of what I try to do because every response to any kind of situation is going to be different. But I know that my immediate reaction is probably going to be the wrong one if I'm having a bad day. And it's probably going to be if I was let alone to react to anything, it would be trying to push the fear aside, run from it, or go the other way, or yell or scream. So if I could just take that breath, that moment and breathe, and then get curious and ask a question, that's probably the best first response to have to anything.
A pretty great first response. Are you a Ted Lasso fan?
I am. I love Ted Lasso.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, when
Yes.
you said that, the stay curious part, that's what I
Hmm.
thought of is just his unbelievable ability to ask questions and stay
Yeah.
curious. So, yeah, I can see what I mean. Lots of things, Adam, make good sense. Okay, so last question for you. What if people can only remember one thing about this conversation that they just chose to listen to, what would be the one thing that you really want them to walk away with today?
I think that fear can be an opportunity if you again get curious about it and start to actually look at what it's really signaling to you. Is it really signaling danger or is it signaling that you have an opportunity to become something more?
Yeah, I love it. And we didn't even mention the fact that you are an author as well. You have a book called Shifting Gears. Show
Oh,
it
this
to us.
little thing?
Oh, that little
Yes.
thing. Oh, you know what? And Shifting Gears, how appropriate. It has a bike. Oh, what the heck is the
Like
thing?
spokes. Yeah.
No, well, that's a gear, right? Like that's
Yeah, it's a
the
gear. I'm
that you
just a
put the chain on.
spokesman.
You're the
Sorry.
spokesman. I'm sorry. That was a pretty good dad joke. Well done.
We got and yeah, bookend with dad jokes, right? Yeah.
So you have a book, you have a podcast, Flow Over Fear, you have a website you talked about, right? So people can find you if they want to. We'll put all of those things in the show notes.
Thank
But
you.
y'all, this is just the tip of the iceberg. He has 166 episodes right now, and by the time this posts, it's probably going to be more like 100 and, I don't know, 75. And they're all worth it. He is definitely somebody worth listening to. And I just want to say thank you, Adam, for sharing your brilliance and for teaching me some things so that I don't make mistakes or the same mistakes maybe that you have. And I'm just really grateful that you were willing to come and share with us today.
It was my honor. I mean, this was such a pleasure. I'm really excited that you started this podcast, by the way, because this is something that leaders need. So thank you for starting this podcast. Really, really excited to listen to it. And yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you too. And friends, this is Productive Joy. If you haven't already followed it, I suggest you do so that you get notifications on all of the super cool people that I have a chance to talk to, because I have some really smart friends. So thank you so much for being here today. I know that Adam has shared some pretty great nuggets of wisdom so that you can figure out how to turn fun into action.